HCAM TV thanks you for watching this presentation. We'd love for you to become a member and use your creativity at our station. Please visit hinghammedia.org or call us at 781-836-5094 if you would like to learn more.
We're having a really wonderful event that's a conversation between Reverend Liz Walker, who's the pastor of Roxbury Presbyterian Church and also the executive director of the nonprofit mission arm of the church, which is the Social Impact Center. A conversation between her and Commissioner Bill Evans, who's the Commissioner of Boston Police Department. And as such, the church has done some great partnership work with the Boston Police Department and really brought down crime levels around the church, which is located in a pretty tough section of Roxbury. And we're having a conversation about that work. We kind of did two things. One, began to work with the police department when some crime levels went up and there were a lot of daytime shootings. Talk about that, the impact of that work and the partnership with the police department and bringing residents of Roxbury together in that partnership. And we also started a program to address the impact of exposure to violence, and that's the Corey Johnson program for post-traumatic healing. So Reverend Liz Walker is going to talk about that tonight, and we have a few other guests too.
We do work in Roxbury called the Corey Johnson Post-Traumatic Healing Project. And it's a program where we try to deal with post-traumatic stress disorder, which is very, very high in urban areas. There are statistics that say that post-traumatic stress disorder is as high in urban areas as it is for veterans coming back from the war because of violence. We started this trauma conversation so that communities could come to our church, people could come and talk about their pain, talk about loss, talk about the violence they've experienced, talk about poverty, talk about all the issues that cause great pain. And it has taken off in the past 2 years in just an amazing way. Now we have events every week. It's sort of like AA. You just come in, you don't have to give your name, you don't have to do anything but tell your story. And so now we're telling other congregations about it because it's been so effective.
My hope is that in listening to two different people in two different positions, one person speaking as a member of the clergy, one speaking as a member of the police, that get a broader understanding of what kinds of approaches are being tried, what seems to work, what doesn't seem to work, and also a broader understanding of the nature of the problems that they're dealing with.
Churches are the best place to have this kind of discussion because churches are places where healing is supposed to happen. Christianity is based on a man who was a healer. And if we truly believe that that is real, then we must have some power to do that too. I think that we say that as Christians, but sometimes we don't believe it. But this is our way of trying to express God's love and the healing power of Jesus Christ.
I think the church has an amazing role to play in terms of helping both area residents and parishioners and the police become committed to healing and working together. And by inviting the police to work in the space of a sanctuary and inviting residents to come and share with the police what's going on, it really becomes an invitation for everyone to bring their best selves, understand the common humanity of each resident, each person struggling with what they're struggling with, the police trying to do the best job they can. And it brings the groups together in a deeper way than sometimes is possible in general community setting. So we've certainly found that to be the case, and the police have acted on what the residents have said they've listened to in thoughtful ways and made changes and made progress. I am so excited about the thought of widening the circle of support for the work we're doing. And I believe as we begin to share the work we're doing with wider and wider communities, it helps to undo that isolation that I don't think any of us honestly wants. So I really see it as a way of in some ways bringing together communities that have grown apart historically for a whole host of complex reasons. But there's a story to be told, and there's a common humanity to be shared, and there's work to be done together.
I've seen a lot of young kids and even older adults be subjected to trauma, and it really does impact people. And you know, recently, even last week, we had a homicide on Regina Road, and I went to there. I was riding my son, he's a senior in high school, to school, and I heard, and I went there. And it was right across from the Lucy Stone School, and you know, we had a body covered up behind the building, and I'm there. And at the same time, you see young kids walking to school, and you can't help but think that what's happened to these kids, that they have to walk by police in yellow tape and realize there's a body lying there. You know, that's not happening in most neighborhoods, and you know, that's what young kids see, unfortunately, in the neighborhood. And that's why, you know, the Roxbury Presbyterian Church and the services that Liz and them do is so important. You know, it really is. You know, we just come off the Super Bowl win. We came off the parade today. But what bothers me more than anything is at 6 o'clock the night before the Super Bowl, when everyone was buckled down, we had a young lady shot in the head on Juliet Street at 6 o'clock, right before the parade. I mean, before the game. And everybody's celebrating, everyone's thinking about the game. You know, obviously we have a big plan on the Super Bowl, but it bothered me also the game that this went on. And when they won, and I got up in the morning, I wasn't concerned that they won. It still bothered me that we had a young lady shot. You know, obviously she was targeted, but I can't help but think her mother, the parents, you know, and everyone's celebrating everywhere, and we have this going on. And I talked to the mayor that morning, and we're talking, and he said, I just came from a school where we talk to young kids. And the first thing he says to the grade, and it was in, I think it was in Dorchester, he said, hey, what happened last night? And, you know, he figured they'd say, oh, the Patriots won the Super Bowl. He said, a woman got shot in the head down the street. And so, you know, it's a whole different world. Here we are thinking about, and when he told me that, I said, what a disconnect. Like, everybody's celebrating here, but over in the neighborhood, the trauma and the grief goes on. And so that's the work that Liz and her church is doing. They're reaching out to these young kids. And I've gone to a lot of homicide scenes over the course of my career, and what bothers me the most is seeing the faces of young kids who are sitting on their porch, or you know, the elderly who are looking out, and I can't help but think, how do these kids go on walking down that street or living in the neighborhood? Because I always remember my father, when he was alive, God bless him, I was a young kid, and we used to ride along Columbia Road all the time, and he used to point out this one house, and he used to say to me, that's where the Boston Strangler had one of his victims. And it gave me the creeps, I think, until this day. And I don't ride by that house without still thinking that the Boston Strangler hid in that house. And it was really traumatic that he told me that. And unfortunately, these kids are walking by locations every day in the city. And I think Boston is a safe city. You know, we had 45 homicides last year, which is 45 too many, but when you look at other major cities, Chicago, you know, almost 700, Milwaukee, St. Louis, we've done a good job through the work of working with all the churches, but, you know, it's still way too many, and there's a lot of people suffering. And the ability to come in to the church and express your feelings and talk about it is real important. And I think, you know, even in my profession, we're learning firsthand the importance of our officers going and receiving, you know, some emotional support. After the marathon bombing, we pulled people off the line. You know, I got off the line, I spoke to someone, because you can't go on and have a healthy life after witnessing what some of these kids and what my officers are witnessing every day. So, you know, when Liz asked me to come down, you know, we're all in this together. Whether you're living in Hingham, whether you're living in South Boston, wherever you're living, there's too many victims, there's too many families being impacted by violence. And, you know, for these young kids to witness it at such a young age, you can't but help think that it's forever going to impact their lives if you don't do something to step in. So I just want to commend the church, Liz, and everyone for what they do, because growing up in the city in certain neighborhoods isn't fair. I do a lot of peace walks throughout the summer, and I see that like these kids have nothing, and to have to see the senseless violence every day and not being able to escape and talk to people, it makes you say that these kids don't have a prayer. If they don't get an opportunity, if they don't get someone to talk to, then they're going to fall prey, they're going to get violent, and they'll be tomorrow's victims. So I just want to thank you all for coming and listening, but this is an important mission to us. Getting these kids trauma, getting them some counseling, and so they grow up to be productive young men and young women. So thank you all, I appreciate you listening.
Trauma and loss are part of the human condition for everyone. In a community like Hingham, in a community like Cambridge where I'm from, in a community like Roxbury. I think that the work that we're doing to create safe space within our church, opening the doors to people who aren't church members necessarily, some are who come, but opening the doors to people to have a safe space to share some harder stories and things that you don't usually say when someone asks you, how are you? We make that safe space and we create an opportunity for people to share those stories and really connect on a deep level. And so there's two things. One, I hope people might think of coming to one of our events on a Thursday night at Roxbury Presbyterian Church, which many people come from pretty far away to attend at times. So people are welcome to come to that. And then I also think that there's space for these kinds of programs to be created within other faith spaces.
So the church is very concerned with issues of spirit, but also issues of social justice, issues of opportunity, issues of peace. And I think that the police, at their best, are also interested in issues of peace, issues of social justice. And each plays a different role in terms of how they interact with the community. But I think talking together and working together, what they come to do is to offer a much more embracing and potentially successful way of dealing with an entire problem rather than reacting to pieces of the problem. I think there's a great danger sometimes in churches being perceived as a place where people go and get away from it all. And yes, there's that. A church is a sanctuary. But a church is also a place where I believe you find the strength to go forward and reach out to take the peace and the communication and the cooperation that you've been experiencing and help to spread that.
I think it's essential in any community, when you look at a community, to not include the churches, is to really miss a dynamic way of healing and a way of communication. And this dialogue that exists between the police and the churches and the community, it's a really beautiful way of bringing the conversation of reconciliation and dialogue to a community when it's broken.
The Boston Police Department, just one of the best of police departments in the country because of community policing. Our community has a real relationship with police officers. They come to the church, they come to our meetings, we keep in contact with them, and that makes a huge difference in how a community survives and how a community thrives. A healthy community is not afraid of police, not angry at police, not standoffish to police, and we believe we have that kind of relationship because the policemen have gone out of their way to come and be with us, not just during an emergency, but in times when nothing is happening. So you develop a relationship, and that makes it much better. They're helping us in this program, and we're very grateful to them. Thank you, Commissioner. I am just so grateful to Commissioner Evans because he always helps us out. And Boston is in much better shape than most of the country, and we know that, and we're proud of that. And we think that our police department is the best in the country, so thank you very much. My job is just to tell you, first of all, I'm usually asleep about 8 o'clock, okay? I'm just saying. So I'm so excited to be up late at night. But my job is to tell you a little bit about what an evening is. We put together these events community conversations on trauma. We tried to model them after AA. We didn't want there to be any requirements. We didn't want you to have to pass through any litmus test or anything. Philip Yancey, in his book on Amazing Grace, talks about the church being a place where there's limited grace. And he talks about this case where he runs into a prostitute, I think it was in Chicago, and she clearly had a drug problem and she was clearly suffering. And he said, well, why don't you go to the church? And she said, the church? Well, they'll judge me there. The church is the last place I'd go. And I think sometimes, not this church, not Roxbury Presbyterian Church, but there are churches that have a stigma of, it's kind of us against you. And you're a sinner, so you don't need to come in here. And people feel that they can't go into the church. So we wanted to make these evenings kind of church-less church. No judgment, no requirements, just come in and talk with us. We are here to form community around you. And so you come in at 6 o'clock and we have dinner. And we have our deacons who love to cook the dinners, and the dinners can be spaghetti or they can be pizza or whatever, but there are as much food as we can get, you can have. Anybody's welcome. You don't have, there's no litmus test, you don't have to be a Christian, you can be, we have all kinds of faiths in our community. Anybody can come in. You sit down, you talk, you meet somebody you don't know, we have fellowship. It's a very Jesus moment, I think. And then we gather people around to the other side of the room, and I kind of facilitate just by telling you that there are no rules here. You are welcome to tell whatever is in your heart. This is a place where we will kind of come around you and be a witness to whatever you've been through. We ask that you speak briefly because we want to give everybody the chance. We ask that you tell your story, and I is very important for the evening. And that's really it. Then we have some music. We have artists who come, and we have a saxophone player. He might play gospel, he might play blues, he might do Michael Jackson, whatever. He just does whatever the Spirit moves him to do. And then we let the evening flow. There is a lot of silence sometimes. People might not get up immediately. They're a little shy or what have you, but inevitably somebody will get up and say, I wasn't going to say anything, but, and then they'll share their stories. And sometimes the stories are very painful and very excruciating, and you would think that if you sat there for a whole evening that it would be too hard to take. One of the first stories we heard, we called some people who were on the front line of trauma work, and we asked them to come just to hear the idea of what we were thinking about. And one of the men came and he stood up and he told us that he had worked at Boston Medical Center. He was one of the street workers, and his job was to handle the violent crime and the people who got injured and ended up at Boston Medical Center. And this particular night, I guess not too long before he'd come to this trauma event, there was a young shooting victim who'd come in. The kid was taken to the emergency room. They worked on him. His family was there. And before the night was over, there was word that the rival gang that had put him in jail had now come to finish the job at Boston Medical. So the police were called, or maybe they were downstairs or what have you. This street worker goes up to kind of tell the family, turns around, and there's the gangbanger, there's the kid. And the kid has a gun. And this is in the hospital. And he says to us, the kid points the gun, the street worker jumps in front, and he's like point blank range, and the gun misfires. And the police get the kid, and he's taken off, nobody's hurt. But the street worker has just faced death, and he can't tell his wife because you don't take that home. So he was telling us that night, I don't think it had happened immediately, but he was saying, I had no place to share this. And he thanked us for being able to share that story with us. And it dawned on me how many of us go through, be it be it a shooting or almost an accident or a fight at work or whatever it is, we carry stuff inside us and we don't share. We live in a culture where there is no pain. That's why you take all the pills you can take, drink all the alcohol you can drink, because you hide it. And this is in us, and it's in us, and it's in us. So it's not just our community. I think it's the whole world. I think we're all traumatized, particularly now with all the changes going on in our nation's capital. So this evening goes on, and the music plays, and people share, and you cry, and you listen, and then suddenly, not suddenly, slowly, it goes on for about an hour and a half, before the evening is over, and this always happens. Colleen Sharka is our clinician. Would you just raise your hand? She's a clinical support who's there with us every night. You can give her applause. Because Colleen and I sit there on the front row as we listen to these stories, and inevitably every night before the evening is over, someone gets up and says how they made it through, how they deal with their particular pain. It might be a religious answer, it might not be, but somehow the night changes on its own, organically, by the Holy Spirit, and you leave a little lifted. I'm telling you, you never leave broken down. And it might just be because you don't feel alone. It might just be because we're all there for you. We have one artist who's a dancer, and his name is Wyatt Jackson. He is an amazing man. He's also the person that Nancy told you about who leads our youth. And one night, Wyatt gets up and he does a dance, and he has us all dancing. And you get this kind of ethnic kind of, I don't know, tribal kind of thing, but it's releasing. It's releasing, that's what it is. And you're letting it go. You see, trauma, pain tears you down, tears your insides down. And if you carry it around long enough, you can implode. And in the urban area, they say hurt people hurt people. And it's true. And the veterans who come back from wars and then are supposed to just get back to normal just can't happen. And so you've got to release and let go. I brought some facts I wanted to share with you, because what scientists are telling us now is that your memories of trauma are stored in the part of the brain where your fight or flight response is located. So when you are traumatized, when you see that accident or you have that horrible fight or something surprising and shocking and horrible happens in front of you, it actually burns that memory in the brain. And if you don't release that, it's there. And one of the things that can happen is your brain can shut down and you can dislocate and you become quiet. I worked for 11 years in South Sudan, and we would go around to villages and talk to women who had been in the midst of a war, and they were disconnected. And so the idea of talking about it, the scientists tell us, actually changes, reroutes the brain. So it's not just touchy-feely, it actually is doing something by sharing your stories. Telling our stories release some of the energy that the experience creates. Telling our stories actually puts order around chaos. You see, if you don't talk about it, it's just this chaotic memory burned into your brain. But when you begin to talk about it, you create order in your spirit and in your soul. So it works. That's all I can tell you. It works. And people come back, and they come back, and they come back. Every night I get up and I say, this is not church. And people get mad at me because this is church, Reverend Liz. Why would you say that? But my point is, this is not judgment. This is not separation. This is not guilt. This is just you are loved. That's what God calls us to do. And so I think these little trauma nights on Thursday nights are sometimes more church than Sunday is. I'm not talking about this church, Father, I'm talking about mine. Because as Christians, we are called to heal. If you read the New Testament, Jesus did some healing. He did some other things, but he did some healing. And we are told that we can do the same thing. That's what the Bible says, and everybody kind of rationalizes it and says, oh no, that was just one time, that's not talking about us, it was talking about the disciples. But we can help heal each other by being there for each other. So this is not rocket science. It's just about a community deciding that we want to be there for our neighbors in the best way that we can be. And people keep coming, and we keep feeling the Spirit, and we want our work replicated because we believe it could happen at any church. You go about your business and all the church business, but this can just be an open space where you can come and talk about your pain. And I am thoroughly convinced that we are living in a world of a great deal of pain. There's rage and there's anger, and everybody's talking about us and them. I have been all over the world, and I assure you, there is only us. And we have got to figure this out, and we have got to help each other heal. So thank you so much for coming out tonight. We just wanted to share our story with you. What you do with it, God will lead you. And I am happy and joyful that He'll lead you to do something good.
I would like to add that I hope that through discussions like this, that people start understanding that they can make such a difference, whether it be a small bereavement group setting, whether it be contacting their police department, finding out ways that we can handle trauma, because trauma is there, but understanding and being trained to know how to handle that, I think that is key for us to really move forward as a community. I love the ability for all of us to come from different places and to have this conversation that's not only essential for Boston, but it's essential for Hingham, it's essential for Massachusetts, it's essential for the U.S. and the world in general, because we need to be able to see, as Liz said, not only an us and them, but it's an us. We are one greater community, and that's what our faith teaches us.
What you mostly hear about in communities like Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan are shocking stories, frankly. That's what gets a lot of coverage. But there's a lot more going on than that. And I think that to hear a more hopeful story, to understand work of healing that's going on, and understand how community members in Roxbury are getting trained to be a big part of that healing, I think that helps people to understand, instead of being like, oh my gosh, this is again another shocking story to read. It's very hard to pick up the paper and hear of another shooting, someone dead, what's happening? It actually fills in so many gaps to the more full story of a community like Roxbury. It's going to be something that actually is very uplifting for people.
The idea of meeting people from other communities, the idea of sharing stories, the idea of just getting to know people breaks down borders. And I believe, regardless of what you hear on the media, that it's not the time to build walls, it's time to break down walls.